Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about the Iron Horse. It's a machine that honestly started out as a bit of a marketing gimmick, but it ended up completely shrinking our world and, building entire empires. We're talking, of course, about the steam locomotive.
So let's just jump right in. You've heard the term horsepower a million times, right? It's how we measure the power of our cars. But have you ever stopped to think, what does a horse actually have to do with a train? With a machine made of iron and steam? It seems kind of random, doesn't it?
Well, get this. The whole idea horsepower was basically one of the greatest marketing ploys of all time. Seriously, you had the steam pioneer James Watt, and he had this amazing new engine, but he had to sell it to people, like mine owners, who were, they were skeptical. So he came up with a brilliant idea. He figured out how much work one of their draft horses could do, and he used that as a unit of measurement. It was something they could actually wrap their heads around. And wow, did it work. I mean, here we are 2.5 centuries later, and we're still using his term on our engines.
But here's the thing about James Watt. He didn't just invent the steam engine out of thin air. He wasn't starting from scratch. His real genius was in taking an idea that had been kind of bubbling away for decades and perfecting it. He was, as they say, standing on the shoulders of some other really brilliant and, often forgotten inventors.
And this whole thing took a long time. We're talking over 100 years of trial and error. It kicks off way back in 1698 with Savory's steam pump, which was pretty basic. Then, a little later in 1712, a guy named Newcomen comes along and makes it a lot more powerful. But the real game changer, that was Watt in 1776. His separate condenser made the engine so much more efficient. It was this step-by-step process, with each person building on what came before, that finally led to Richard Trevithick doing something truly crazy in 1801. He put one of these things on wheels.
Okay, so you'd think putting an engine on rails would be an instant win, right? Nope, not even close. The early days were honestly a bit of a disaster. It was like a comedy of errors. You had constant breakdowns, boilers exploding. I mean, there were moments where this so-called revolutionary technology looked just plain silly.
And nothing shows these growing pains better than this one story from 1830. So picture this. This brand new American locomotive called the Tom Thumb gets challenged to a race. Its opponent? A regular old horse pulling a rail car. The race starts, and the engine just takes off. It's a symbol of this new industrial power, and then a little leather belt snaps. That's it. By the time the frantic engineer gets it fixed, the horse has just trotted calmly past the finish line. Yep, the machine lost to a horse.
So you can see why people were skeptical, right? The world really needed something big. A single, decisive event that would just shut down all the doubters and prove once and for all that steam power wasn't just some clunky novelty, it was the future. And that moment was about to happen, over in England.
And this event was called the Rainhill Trials. You can think of it like a high-stakes competition, a bake-off, really, to find the best engine for a new railway. And you won't believe this, one of the competitors, called the Cycloped, was actually powered by a horse, on a treadmill, inside the engine. Yeah, that one got disqualified pretty quickly. The real fight was between the actual steam engines.
And when the dust settled, there was one undeniable winner, a locomotive called the Rocket, built by George Stephenson. It didn't just win, it crushed the competition. It hit a speed of 36 miles per hour, which back then was just unheard of. It was fast, it was powerful, and maybe the most important part, it was reliable. This was the proof everyone had been waiting for.
And people were absolutely captivated. They saw this machine, this thing of iron and steam, that had the power and the stamina to outdo any animal. So they gave it this perfect, powerful nickname, the Iron Horse. And just like that, its creator, George Stephenson, became known as the father of the railways.
The impact on everyday life was just staggering. I mean, think about that trip between Liverpool and Manchester, two huge industrial cities. On a canal barge, that journey took 12 grueling hours. By horse-drawn coach, maybe 3. The train, it cut it down to under 2 hours. It was like time itself was literally being compressed. The railway age had officially begun.
So Stephenson's rocket was the spark, and what came next was like a wildfire, an absolute explosion of railway building across the globe. And this didn't just make travel faster, it completely remade societies, it forged entire nations, and yeah, sometimes it made old problems even worse.
So let's hop across the Atlantic. In the United States, they were taking on one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history, the Transcontinental Railroad. This was way more than just laying down some track. This was about taming a continent. And the economic impact was just unbelievable. The cost to get from one coast to the other, it plummeted by a jaw-dropping 85%. But there's a really dark side to this story. This amazing feat of nation-building came at a brutal human price. You see, while the railroad was connecting the country and making people rich, it was being built on the backs of exploited migrant laborers, particularly Chinese workers. And this just fueled racist attitudes, which led directly to really shameful laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act. It's a dark legacy that's literally built right into the railroad tracks.
And you see a really similar, complicated story playing out in colonial India. The British built this huge, impressive railway network. But let's be clear about its purpose. It was a tool of empire. The tracks weren't laid out to help connect Indian people or communities. No, they were like arteries, designed for one thing: to suck the wealth, the tea, the cotton, all the resources out of the country and ship it all back to Britain.
But then, something amazing happened. After India won its independence in 1947, they took that same railway system, that tool of colonial extraction, and they completely transformed it. It became the nation's lifeline. It turned into a powerful engine for their own economy, and a symbol that helped stitch a massive, diverse country together.
And this whole thing just went global. It was a phenomenon. Back in Britain, they called it railway mania. People were obsessed. France and Germany were scrambling to catch up. And then you look at these massive countries like Canada and Russia. Building things like the Canadian Pacific or the Trans-Siberian Railway was more than just an economic decision. It was an act of pure national will, a way to connect these huge, sprawling landscapes and turn them into actual unified countries.
But of course, technology never stands still. The age of that classic smoke-belching iron horse, it wasn't going to last forever. You know, that same relentless human drive for progress that created it in the first place? Well, it started demanding something even better, something faster, something cleaner, something more efficient. The journey was definitely not over.
It's funny, by the 1930s, that same coal smoke that used to be a symbol of progress was now seen for what it was: pollution, basically poison in the cities. So that's what really pushed the switch over to diesel engines, which were cleaner and more powerful. Then, for modern passenger lines, electric trains came along, offering even more speed and less pollution. And now we are on the verge of the next massive leap forward.
And it's called maglev. That's short for magnetic levitation. Now this is where things get really cool. These trains have no wheels. I'll say that again. No wheels. They don't touch the track. They literally use powerful magnets to float above the track. And what does that do? It gets rid of friction, the one thing that's always holding things back.
And when you get rid of friction, the result is just mind-blowing speed. Your typical high-speed train, the kind with wheels, they kind of top out around 200 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. But the Shanghai maglev, it just cruises along at 268 miles per hour. It is one of the fastest ways to get around on the entire planet.
So think about where we started. This whole journey began with a sputtering steam engine losing a race to a horse, and now it has led us to trains that literally fly on a cushion of magnetic fields. From that first iron horse that built entire nations to the magnetic wonders of today, it's clear that our deep, fundamental need to connect with each other, to move faster, and to just keep pushing forward, well, that's what continues to lay the tracks for whatever comes next.